Let's talk about the USC offense. We talked about the defense. Let's now shift to the offense. Another solid game for this offensive line. And, the final stats weren't spectacular, but, just very consistently, this offensive line has provided good pass protection for Jaden Mayaba all season long. And that continued against UCLA, was able to spring King Miller at times. I mean, it wasn't a masterpiece, but it was just a solid, workmanlike performance crash. And I think one thing that really needs to be said about this USC offensive line, not just that it's been dealing with injuries and reshuffled combinations every week. Shotgun Spratley mentioned that USC's gone through at least 7 different major starting offensive line combinations, something to that effect. You all know Shotgun. He tweeted something to that effect. You can find that tweet without too much of a problem. But I'm just struck, Crash, and everyone here watching at the Voice of College Football, that we talk about ceilings with teams and with groups, how high their potential is. With this USC offensive line, I'm struck by how high the floor has been. Even on their worst game, their worst night, they're still not bad. Their worst game would maybe be like a C+ or a B-, and they've turned in a lot of B+ and A- type performances, Crash. Just the consistency of this unit. You say you want consistency on defense. Well, this offensive line was a genuinely consistent unit for USC under Zach Hansen.
I agree, Matt. I think the only time I was ever really too critical of them was when Jeonre Reed first got thrown into the fire. Granted, it was, him first really getting meaningful playing time against Illinois after Killian O'Connor got injured for the first time this season. And yeah, I obviously had the bad snap, ran too far down and wiped out the trick play from Jade Mayava and Makai Lemon against the Illini. But since then, he's been much more consistent, and that goes for everyone else, especially with O'Connor and Elijah Page going out multiple times this season. So I really have been impressed with just how well they've just played, especially like I've said before, and having talked to Justin Dedich about this on my show, is he's agreed with the idea that, yeah, it is very hard for those 5 offensive linemen to gel a lot of times. So I was really impressed to see how they just, no matter what happened, no matter who got shuffled around, who went down, who came in, whoever it was, they just found a way to just stay really solid. And I think give Jade Mayava a lot of good pass protection. So it's just really, I'm impressed to see this group all year. Like I said, I really was only critical of Reed that first time, but then been impressed how he's gelled with that group. And a lot of credit does go to Zach Hansen for really, keeping those guys ready and having them ready for whatever got thrown at them.
A comment here from Social Studies Guy. Priority 1, hit the weight room. I bring up this comment for multiple reasons. One is Trumaine Carroll, and we talked about this on last week's Tuesday show, that Trumaine Carroll came aboard in the spring. So it's not as though he could have set in place his full program. I mean, obviously he got the fundamentals, he got the basic principles and ideas, conveying them to his players. But in terms of transforming these bodies into the kinds of bodies that Trumaine Carroll wants, you don't get that in a couple months. He needs this full off-season cycle at USC, and that is one definite reason for optimism going into 2026. We get Trumaine Carroll with a full cycle with the returning players. They can really absorb his methods. Crash, you mentioned last week on our Tuesday show that the strength coach is the coach that probably spends the most time with all the players, in terms of the daily work in the weight room. So that's really encouraging. But I also mentioned Social Studies Guy's point about the weight room because this offensive line held up even without having the benefit of that full 1-year cycle under Trumaine Carroll. So this line didn't really have a chance to fully implement Trumaine Carroll's strength plan. And yet because Zach Hansen was such a rock star, the best assistant coach on this staff, bar none, in 2025, again, the floor was really high for this group. And now with a full off season for those who are coming back next year, Trumaine Carroll can really raise the ceiling, but the floor is really high. So that's why I mentioned social studies guys' point about the weight room, because Trumaine Carroll can now take this floor that's been established in 2025, and he can now pursue a much higher ceiling in 2026. All right, so continuing with our look at the USC offense. Now, one of the big stories, Makai Lemon, Jacoby Lane, sidelined in the first quarter for disciplinary reasons. How did you think the backups played? How did you think the backups responded to this situation? And well, we'll get to Makai Lemon in a minute, but how did you rate the backups in this game, being thrown into the fire? And they probably weren't expecting this. So how did they do in this adjusted last-minute type of situation?
Well, I think it was definitely they struggled a bit. Obviously, the USC did strike first and get that early touchdown, but then kind of after that, it seemed like it was kind of a bit slow. Kind of they struggled a bit, and then I think kind of once Lemon and Lane got back in, that's part of what helped the offense slowly start to get rolling again. But I think for that first part, and I don't even want to say, I don't know what the disciplinary suspension was about, but I do think, especially considering an opponent of UCLA's caliber, I think was a good opportunity for them to get reps, especially considering Lemon is probably off to the NFL next year, and Lane could very well follow him too. So I think it was honestly meaningful for those guys to get those reps, because then it just helps them get more comfortable in the system next year, especially if Jade Mayava does return.
All right, and the running game, King Miller, man, this guy finished the race. This guy carried it through. It's not as though he just splashed onto the scene against Michigan in mid-October. Like, this guy continued to deliver for USC. Really impressive what he did. And, obviously the offensive line has to contribute to this, but, King Miller is still making significant contributions to this team. Like, he did it from the start, and he carried it through to the end against UCLA.
Absolutely, Matt. You've just seen how he's been ever since he got it. Even when he just got reps against, Missouri State, he was super electrifying and exciting. Obviously, we weren't sure how it would translate when he got thrown in against Michigan and then just had to play the rest of the year as the RB1. But it's been really fun and just exciting to watch him, especially with what he can do next year, especially if, USC does get Wayman Jordan back and are able to, pair them. That can be a really dynamic running back room right there. And then especially, I'm not sure if Brian Jackson comes back too. I'm not sure exactly what he's looking at. I wouldn't be surprised if he transfers, just given kind of how he even after coming, Jordan and Eli Sanders went out injured, he could possibly want to look for a fresh start. But it's just really impressive to see just King Miller just get the job done and just run the dang ball.
All right, let's now talk about Makai Lemon and talking about the Biletnikoff Award. Now, Lemon did come up with a big touchdown catch. He also came up with a big kick return as well. So we made a couple notable splash plays in the second half. Now, Jeremiah Smith of Ohio State, Lemon's main competitor for the Biletnikoff, he came up with one touchdown against Michigan, but that was a slugfest in the snow. It was mostly Ohio State with a ball control running game. Smith made that one real high-profile catch. Not a whole lot else. How would you size up the Biletnikoff race? And keeping in mind that Jeremiah Smith gets that extra national television spotlight in the Big Ten championship game against Indiana this coming Saturday.
Well, I think we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, Matt. Jeremiah Smith had the advantage of playing in a much higher profile game. Both College Game Day and Big Noon Kickoff were there. All the hype was there. Everyone was hyped up for me. And hell, I even watched for a few minutes of it. And just the way they just introed the game with Billy Bob Thornton from Landman, which, I'm going to watch after we're done tonight. But still, just, the fact that they get him and just create this big storyline just around the game in general. And then to see what he did just really, I think, helps his narrative. And then you also talk about, he's going to get to play in another high-profile game against Indiana in the Big Ten championship next week. But obviously, Makai Lemon probably didn't help that he had to serve a one-quarter suspension. But then still, when he got in, he did definitely. I thought he played well, was able to really help USC. But still, I think Lemon should win. But he definitely kind of the circumstances over these last couple of weeks aren't exactly helping his cause, given just the kind of platform that Jeremiah Smith has been getting during that same time frame.
You mentioned the quarterback room for USC, that whether it's Maava or Longstreet next year, USC should be in pretty good hands. But let's tackle that question a little bit more coming out of this UCLA game. I mean, if it is Maava, you're getting a guy who has now had a full season under his belt. He played a little bit at UNLV, dipped his toes a little bit in the water late last season, a few games and then a bowl game. But now he's gone through a full season. So if it's Maava next year, and obviously we're not predicting what's going to happen, that we have 8.5 months for that. But just, if it's Maava, you get the benefit of someone who's had a lot of experience. But with Longstreet, you're banking on the upside. And really, Longstreet would be in the position that Maava was last year. Sitting behind the number one, waiting for his chance, waiting for his turn. So, I don't think the UCLA game dramatically moved the needle. It really comes down to, what Maava thinks, what his advisors say, how he's sizing up his full situation. And we didn't get to see too much of Husan Longstreet, but what's your initial feeling? Because again, we're going to have many months to kick this one around, or however long this drama lasts, however uncertain it remains. But just what's your initial impression of Maava versus Longstreet in 2026 at USC?
Well, I think if Maava comes back, I would expect he'd start, and I think he will come back. But I think really just with Maava, you're going to just see a team that's kind of just going to, like you said, have that benefit of having a guy who's got the experience of now starting, not just having now done a full year at USC, but also his year at UNLV is really, I think, going to benefit him. And even the 4 games he had when he got thrown in after Miller Moss was benched, I think it's all going to benefit him. So I think USC would just be in more stable hands. And I think like what Jeff Rodriguez just said about Longstreet, I think, yes, Jeff, I fully agree. I think Longstreet probably does have a higher ceiling. But yeah, he's like maybe a first-year starter. And I mean, I'm not to say that he doesn't deserve his chance at some point. It's just I think he might have to wait another year. But I think also, like, look around the country this year at all the first-time starters who either struggled or didn't live up to the billing. I mean, especially Arch Manning comes to mind in that regard. And I'm not saying, like, Arch isn't a bad quarterback, but it definitely took him some time to get going. And, I mean, Texas is now, like, because of that, they're now really trying to have to push for their case to make the college football playoff. So I think really it just, with Maava, you're going to get guaranteed experience as a starter, and what you're going to get. Not that I'm confident he'll continue to improve, but Longstreet, it could maybe be definitely a bit of a learning curve in those first few games if he takes over the starting job next year.